Settle in now and imagine the world before maps, before names, before footsteps, before even the first soft breath of an animal moving through the dark. There were no cities yet. No temples, no fires, no voices carried across valleys, no ships crossed the horizon, and no one stood beside the shore to wonder where the sea might end. Earth was young, restless, and still learning how to become a home. And somewhere in that deep beginning, long before memory, the first oceans began to gather. They did not appear all at once, like a blue blanket suddenly laid across the planet. They came slowly, over immense stretches of time, through cooling air, falling rain, volcanic breath, and the quiet patience of gravity. The young Earth had once been a world of heat and stone, shaped by impacts, fire, and the slow separation of heavy metals sinking inward while lighter rocks rose toward the surface. Its sky was not the sky we know tonight. It was thick with gases, steam, and the exhalations of volcanoes. Then, as the surface cooled, water vapor began to condense. Rain may have fallen for ages. Not the passing rain of an afternoon, tapping softly against a window, but rain across a world without forests, without birdsong, without shelter, rain falling onto black volcanic plains, rain hissing against warm stone, rain gathering in low places, flowing through fresh cracks in the crust, finding basins, filling hollows, becoming lakes, becoming seas. And slowly, patiently, the first oceans formed. Some of Earth's water may also have arrived through ancient impacts, carried by icy bodies and water-rich minerals from the young solar system. The full story is still being studied, but the result was extraordinary. A planet that could hold liquid water on its surface. A world where chemistry could become more delicate. A world where time could begin to write in waves. Picture those early oceans beneath a dimmer young sun. The water may not have been clear blue in the way we imagine tropical seas today. It may have held dissolved minerals, iron, and volcanic chemicals. The shores were not lined with palms or coral reefs. There were no shells washed into the sand. There was no sand as we know it in many places, only weathering rock, ash, mud, and newly forming sediments. Yet even then, the ocean was already doing something profound. It was softening the planet. Water moved across stone and changed it. It carried minerals from land to sea. It gathered warmth and released it slowly. It helped regulate the young world, turning violent beginnings into cycles, rhythms, and balances. The ocean became Earth's great memory keeper, receiving the dust of continents, the chemistry of volcanoes, and the traces of a planet becoming stable enough for life. Long before ancient Egypt rose beside the Nile, long before Mesopotamian traders followed rivers through the fertile plains, long before ruined cities slept beneath desert sand, the ocean was already older than imagination. Every civilization that would one day look toward the sea inherited something from these first waters. The Phoenician sailor, the Greek islander, the Polynesian navigator beneath the stars, the fisherman casting a net at dawn, all of them lived beside an ocean whose story began in the planet's earliest silence. And in that silence, life may have found its first shelter. The earliest life did not need sunlight in the way a forest does. It did not need flowers, seasons, or animals. It may have begun in warm chemical places, perhaps near hydrothermal vents deep beneath the sea, where heated water rose from the crust carrying minerals into the darkness. Or it may have formed in shallow pools along ancient shores, where wet and dry cycles helped simple molecules assemble into more complex forms. We do not yet know the full path, but we know the ocean was central. In water, molecules could meet gently. They could drift, combine, separate, and combine again. The ocean gave early chemistry, a place to continue. It gave the fragile beginnings of life protection from the harsher conditions above. And so, in a world without eyes to see it, something small and remarkable began. Life learning to exist. For a long time, life remained simple, microscopic, quiet. invisible to any human imagination. There were no swimming creatures, no sea monsters, no whales singing in the deep, only tiny living forms, perhaps single-celled organisms, carrying out the first slow experiments of biology. And yet, these tiny lives would change everything. Over immense spans of time, some early organisms began to use sunlight in a new way. Through photosynthesis, they released oxygen as a byproduct. At first, this oxygen reacted with dissolved iron in the oceans, forming iron-rich minerals that settled onto the seafloor. These ancient deposits still exist today in banded iron formations, layered records of a time when the seas themselves were changing color, chemistry, and destiny. The ocean was not only holding life, it was being transformed by life. And so the early seas became part of a quiet exchange. Earth shaped life, and life shaped Earth. Stone, water, air, and biology were learning to speak to one another, slowly, over billions of years. As you rest, imagine those ancient waves moving under a sky without birds. Imagine the dark water stretching across a world, still young, still warm, still becoming. No human story had begun, but the foundations of every human story were being laid. The ocean was already there before language, before myth, before the first ancestor looked at the horizon and wondered. It was there in the beginning as a cradle, a mirror, and a keeper of time. And perhaps that is why the sound of water still feels ancient to us. A stream at night, rain on a roof, waves folding gently onto shore, they seem to reach deeper than thought. They remind the body of something older than memory, something calm and original, as if the planet itself is breathing slowly beside us. So tonight, let the early ocean be a peaceful image in the mind, vast, dark, quiet, and patient. A young Earth cooling beneath a dim sun, rain falling for ages, basins filling with water, minerals drifting through warm seas. The first life beginning its soft, almost invisible work. Nothing rushes in deep time. The ocean teaches this gently. Everything arrives slowly. Everything changes slowly. And even the smallest beginning, given enough time, can become a world. Let us drift a little farther now, into the long, gentle middle of Earth's earliest ocean story. The first waters have gathered. The young planet has cooled enough to hold seas across its surface. Rain has fallen into basins. Rivers have begun to trace their first uncertain paths, and volcanic islands rise like dark silhouettes from warm water. There are still no forests. No animals move along the shore. No wings cross the sky. The world is open, quiet, and almost entirely unfamiliar. Yet beneath the surface, the ocean is alive with change. For millions upon millions of years, the early seas were places of subtle chemistry. Minerals dissolved from young rocks. Volcanic gases entered the water. Heat rose from the planet's interior through cracks in the seafloor. The ocean floor itself was not still. It spread, sank, folded, and remade itself as the deep machinery of Earth slowly moved the crust. Long before human beings would give names to continents, the planet was already practicing the language of geography. Landmasses gathered and separated. Ancient fragments of crust rose above the waves, then eroded grain by grain. Rivers carried the remains of rock back into the sea. New sediments settled in layers, each one a quiet page in Earth's first great book. If you could float above that world, you might see wide oceans under a pale sky, broken by volcanic lands and early continents, smaller and stranger than the ones we know. The coastlines would not match any modern map. There would be no Europe, no Africa, no Asia, no Americas. Only shifting pieces of stone, slowly moving across the planet's surface, as if the Earth were dreaming in its sleep. And in the water, life continued its patient work. The earliest organisms were still small, but they were not unimportant. They lived in mats, films, and drifting communities. Some built layered structures called stromatolites, which can still be found as fossil traces in ancient rocks. These structures grew slowly, layer upon layer, as microbial life trapped sediments and minerals. They were not grand, like temples or pyramids. They did not tower above a landscape, but in their quiet way, they were among the first living monuments on Earth. Imagine them in warm, shallow seas, under sunlight that fell across waters rich with minerals, low, rounded forms rising gently from the sea floor. Around them, tides moved in and out. Fine sediment settled. Microbes lived, grew, and left behind delicate patterns that would remain hidden in stone for billions of years. Much later, humans would build cities beside water. Ur would rise near the rivers of Mesopotamia. Ancient Egypt would flourish beside the Nile. Harappan towns would gather along the Indus. Ports would open onto the Mediterranean, the Red Sea, the Indian Ocean, and beyond. People would shape clay tablets, carve stone, raise walls, launch boats, and trade across coastlines. But all of this came unimaginably later. Before every harbor, before every lighthouse, before every ocean myth, there were microbial worlds beneath a silent sky. Life was not yet dramatic. It was not loud or visible. It did not hunt, sing, run, or fly. It simply endured. It learned how to use energy. It learned how to alter the environment around it. And through this slow persistence, it began to reshape the entire planet. One of the deepest changes was oxygen. At first, oxygen did not fill the atmosphere as it does today. It was absorbed into rocks and oceans, reacting with iron and other elements. The seas were chemical worlds, and oxygen was like a new ingredient introduced drop by drop. Over time, as more oxygen was produced than Earth could absorb, it began to accumulate in the air. This was not a quick event. It unfolded slowly, across vast stretches of time, with pauses and reversals and hidden transformations. But eventually, it changed the planet's surface, and it changed the sky. It opened the future for more complex forms of life. For some early organisms, oxygen was harmful. For others, it would become a source of energy. In this quiet turning point, Earth was preparing for possibilities that had not yet arrived. Larger cells, more complex bodies, animals, movement, vision, and eventually the long chain of life that would lead to forests, coral reefs, dinosaurs, mammals, and human beings listening to stories in the night. The early ocean was like a cradle, but also like a workshop. It held the materials of transformation. In its depths, chemistry became biology. In its shallows, microbes built layers of stone. Along its shores, waves broke rock into sediment. Beneath its floor, heat and minerals continued to rise from the interior of the planet. Above it, the atmosphere slowly changed. Everything was connected, but nothing was hurried. This is one of the most soothing truths of deep time. Earth did not become habitable in a single moment. It became habitable through relationship: water and rock, air and sunlight, volcano and tide, life and mineral. Each part touched another, and each touch left a trace. The ocean taught the planet balance. It absorbed heat. It carried dissolved elements. It softened extremes. It connected shorelines that no eye had yet seen. Even today, when we look at the sea, we are looking at an ancient system that has been helping Earth breathe, cool, circulate, and renew itself since the earliest ages. There is comfort in that continuity. The same planet that once held dark mineral seas now holds moonlit waves, fishing villages, coral gardens, kelp forests, and quiet beaches where people walk at dusk. The ocean has changed endlessly, and yet it remains itself, moving, receiving, remembering. So rest with this image for a moment. A shallow, ancient sea. Warm water, pale sunlight, low microbial structures rising from the sea floor. No voices, no footsteps, only tides, minerals, and the nearly invisible life that would one day make a breathable world. In the silence of those early oceans, Earth was not empty. It was becoming. Let us move onward now, slowly and peacefully, into an age when the oceans were no longer only places of shelter, but quiet engines of planetary change. The world is still ancient beyond imagining. There are no animals walking beneath trees, because there are no trees. There are no birds crossing the morning sky, no insects among flowers, no grasslands bending in the wind. The continents are still unfamiliar, shifting, gathering, breaking apart, and gathering again through the deep patience of plate tectonics. But the oceans are awake with invisible work. Across shallow seas, microbial life continues to spread in thin living films and layered mats. Some of these organisms are using sunlight. They are taking in carbon dioxide, drawing energy from the sun, and releasing oxygen into the surrounding water. To them, this is simply life continuing, a small exchange, a quiet rhythm. But across millions of years, small exchanges can become world-changing forces. At first, the oxygen did not remain free for long. It met iron dissolved in the ancient seas. The iron reacted with oxygen and formed minerals that settled gently onto the ocean floor. Layer after layer, these minerals accumulated, creating the banded iron formations that geologists still study today. They are among Earth's oldest written pages, not written in ink, but in red and dark stone. Imagine the seafloor slowly receiving those layers. No sound but water moving above. No witness but the planet itself. Oxygen rising from tiny cells. Iron falling out of ancient seawater. Stone, recording a transformation so slow that no single moment would have seemed dramatic. And yet, in that slow settling, the future was being prepared. The ocean was changing color, changing chemistry, changing destiny. Eventually, much of the dissolved iron was used up. Oxygen could begin to linger in the water, and then in the atmosphere. This long transformation is often called the Great Oxidation Event. But even that name can feel too sharp, too sudden, for something so gradual and immense. It was less like a door opening all at once, and more like dawn arriving through a very long night. A little more oxygen, then a little more, then enough to alter the sky. For many early forms of life, oxygen was not gentle. It could be reactive, even dangerous. Some organisms retreated into places where oxygen was low. Others adapted, and eventually, life found a way to use oxygen as a powerful source of energy. This was one of Earth's quiet revolutions. Not a revolution with armies or crowns. Not like the rise and fall of ancient empires along the Nile, the Tigris, the Euphrates, or the Yellow River. This was a revolution without monuments, without kings, without a single visible hero. It happened in cells, in water, in chemistry, in the delicate meeting between sunlight and life. And because of it, the planet began moving toward complexity. The early oceans made possible the later oceans. The mineral-rich seas of the ancient Earth would one day become home to soft-bodied creatures, drifting animals, strange early ecosystems, and eventually reefs, fish, reptiles, whales, and human sailors reading stars above dark water. But before any of that, oxygen had to gather. The atmosphere had to change. The ocean had to become a place where larger and more energetic life could survive. There is something deeply calming in this thought. Everything we know as alive and breathing was prepared by patience. The air entering your lungs tonight is part of a story that began in ancient seas. It was shaped by organisms too small to see, living long before the first forests and long before the first human ancestor stood upright on an African plain. Every breath carries an inheritance from the ocean, and the ocean kept working. As continents moved, seas opened and closed. Mountains rose, weathered, and sent minerals down rivers. Carbon cycled between air, water, rock, and life. The earth cooled and warmed. Ice sometimes reached far across the planet. At other times, warm, shallow seas spread over continents, creating calm marine worlds where sediment settled and life slowly diversified. Deep time is not stillness. It is motion that has become too vast for the human mind to hurry. Picture now an ancient coastline under a quiet sky. The air is changing, though no creature is there to notice. The sea touches dark stone. Gentle waves fold and unfold. Microbial mats lie in the shallows, gold and green beneath the sun. Far offshore, iron minerals settle to the seafloor, forming layers that will survive for billions of years. Nothing announces itself, and yet everything is happening. Much later, people will find those ancient rocks and understand that Earth's atmosphere was not always the same. They will realize that even the air has a history. Even the sky has changed. Even the simple act of breathing depends on a long partnership between ocean, sunlight, stone, and life. This is the quiet wonder of the early oceans. They did not merely fill the low places of Earth. They helped make the planet breathable. They held the first life, then were changed by it. They received oxygen, minerals, sediments, and heat. They carried the future without knowing it. And through their long, steady presence, they turned a young, rocky world into a place where life could grow more complex, more varied, and eventually aware of itself. So as you rest, let the mind drift like a small boat over an ancient sea. Below you are layers of time. Above you is a sky slowly becoming blue. Around you is water, dark and warm, moving with the same gentle rhythm that still touches shorelines today. The earliest oceans remind us that change does not need to be loud to be powerful. Sometimes the greatest transformations are quiet. Sometimes the world is remade by things almost too small to notice. A cell in sunlight, a breath of oxygen, a mineral settling in the deep, a wave moving softly across stone. Let us continue gently now toward the ancient shorelines of Earth, where sea and land met in silence long before any human foot pressed into wet sand. By this time, the oceans had already become old. Not old in the way of a ruined city, or an abandoned road, or a forgotten temple half covered by vines. Older than all of those. Older than writing, older than firelight, older than the first stories whispered beneath the stars. The oceans had been moving for billions of years. They had gathered rain, received rivers, softened rock, hidden life, changed the air, and carried minerals through the slow circulation of the planet. Their tides rose and fell beneath skies that shifted across immense ages. Their shorelines appeared, vanished, and appeared again as continents drifted, sea levels changed, and climates moved through long cycles of warmth and cold. Imagine one of those ancient coasts. The land behind it is not green with forest yet. There may be bare rock, low volcanic hills, mudflats, and wide shallow pools reflecting the pale sky. The air is quieter than any place we know today. No gulls cry over the water. No insects hum in the reeds. No grasses bend along the dunes. The shore is simple, open, and vast. Waves arrive with soft persistence. They touch the land, withdraw, and return. Each wave carries tiny grains. Each tide leaves behind a trace. Over time, mud becomes layered sediment. Sand becomes stone. Minerals settle in delicate patterns. What seems temporary becomes permanent, and what seems permanent slowly wears away. The early shoreline was one of Earth's great meeting places. Here, water met rock. Sunlight met chemistry. Dryness met moisture. Molecules gathered, separated, and gathered again. Some scientists have wondered whether places like these warm pools, tidal flats, and mineral-rich edges may have played a role in life's earliest chemistry. Others look to deep-sea vents, far below the waves, where heat and minerals rise from the crust. Perhaps the true story includes many places. Perhaps life's beginning was not a single point, but a long unfolding across different environments, each offering something useful. Warmth, protection, energy, minerals, rhythm. The ocean did not need to choose one path. It offered many, and slowly, life continued. For most of Earth's history, the living world remained small, soft, and hidden. The ancient seas held microbial communities, simple cells, and later more complex cells that carried within them new possibilities. Some cells learned cooperation. Some became part of larger systems. In time, life became more intricate, though still mostly unseen. The ocean was patient with this hidden complexity. It gave life room to practice. Long before the first animals left trails in seafloor mud, long before shells appeared in abundance, long before coral reefs brightened shallow waters, the foundations were being prepared. Cells changed. Atmospheres shifted. Continents moved. Nutrients flowed. Ice ages came and went. There were times when Earth may have grown intensely cold, perhaps with ice spreading across great parts of the planet. The oceans may have been covered in places by thick, frozen surfaces, while beneath them, liquid water remained. Life endured in sheltered regions near vents, under ice, or in open waters where conditions allowed. Even in hardship, the ocean kept a kind of inner warmth, a continuity beneath the surface. Then, after cold ages, warmth returned. Ice retreated. Weathering increased. Nutrients washed into the sea. The chemistry of the oceans changed again. Life responded slowly, quietly, and then with growing richness. Across deep time, renewal followed difficulty. Not quickly, not simply, but with the strange patience of Earth itself. This rhythm change, pressure, endurance, renewal would repeat many times. It would shape the history of life, long before humans began naming ages and drawing timelines. It would guide the rise of early animals, the spread of marine ecosystems, the creation and loss of inland seas, and eventually the landscapes where ancient people would build their homes. Every ruined city near a river or coast belongs to this longer story. The stone harbors of the Mediterranean, the silted channels of Mesopotamia, the drowned settlements along old shorelines, the trading ports of the Indian Ocean, the canoes crossing Pacific waters beneath stars. All of them are late chapters in a much older relationship between land, sea, and life. Human civilization has always depended on water, but water had already been shaping civilization's stage for billions of years. It carved valleys before there were villages. It laid sediments before there were bricks. It moved shorelines before there were maps. It carried minerals before there were coins, and opened pathways before there were roads. As you rest now, imagine the ocean not as a boundary, but as a memory of rain falling on young stone, a memory of microbes in warm shallows, a memory of oxygen rising into the air, a memory of ice, darkness, warmth, and renewal. The ancient ocean held all of this without hurry, and perhaps that is why shorelines feel so calming to the human mind. They are places where change is visible, but gentle. A wave comes in, a wave goes out. The sand is reshaped, but softly. The horizon remains, but never exactly the same. In the early oceans, this quiet motion was already present. Before human history, before language, before myth, the sea was practicing the rhythm that still soothes us now. Return, withdraw, return again. And in that rhythm, Earth kept becoming. Let us come now to the final part of this quiet journey, not by leaving the ancient oceans behind, but by allowing them to remain with us. Because in a deep and beautiful way, the early oceans never truly disappeared. They changed, of course. Their chemistry shifted. Their coastlines moved. Their depths opened and closed as continents drifted across the globe. Ancient seas dried into salt flats, flooded again, vanished beneath mountains, or left their memory in limestone, shale, iron, and fossil traces. But the great presence of water, the slow, circulating, life-holding ocean continued. It moved through every age that followed. It was there when the first simple animals began to stir in the seas. It was there when soft-bodied creatures left delicate impressions in mud. It was there when shelled life spread across shallow waters, when reefs began to grow, when fish moved through greenish light, when strange marine reptiles later crossed warm inland seas, and when enormous creatures finally filled the blue distances of a much younger world. The ocean watched life become more visible. For billions of years, life had been nearly invisible. Microbial, chemical, hidden in thin films, deep vents, and warm shallows. Then, slowly, bodies became larger. Shapes became more varied. Movement became more graceful and more purposeful. Eyes appeared. Predators and prey began their ancient dance. Seafloors became landscapes of tracks, burrows, shells, and soft motion. And still the ocean did not hurry. It simply held the stage. Above it, continents gathered into supercontinents and broke apart again. Mountains rose from collisions of stone. Rivers carried their minerals back to the sea. Climates warmed and cooled. Ice advanced, retreated, and advanced again. Extinctions came like long shadows across the living world, and after them, life returned in new forms. Not the same forms, but life returned. This is one of the ocean's most calming lessons. Earth's history is not a straight line. It is a tide. It moves forward through loss and renewal, through silence and abundance, through endings that become beginnings in ways no living thing could predict. The early oceans prepared the world for this rhythm. They taught Earth how to cycle. Water rose into clouds, fell as rain, flowed through rivers, entered seas, and rose again. Minerals washed from land to water. Carbon moved through air, rock, ocean, and life. Heat traveled through currents. Nutrients drifted. Tiny organisms fed larger systems. The planet learned continuity through movement. Much later, human beings would emerge into this ancient pattern. They would stand beside coasts and rivers with questions in their eyes. They would gather shellfish from tidal flats, follow fish migrations, cross narrow waters, and settle near estuaries where fresh water met salt. They would build villages, then ports, then cities. They would carve boats from trees, raise sails, study winds, and learn the stars. The ocean became a road, before there were roads across much of the world. It carried obsidian, grain, spices, metals, stories, songs, beliefs, and languages. It connected islands and empires. It opened trade routes through the Mediterranean, across the Indian Ocean, along the coasts of Africa, through Southeast Asian waters, and into the wide Pacific, where navigators read waves, clouds, birds, and constellations with extraordinary care. Yet even these human journeys, so meaningful to us, are very recent. They are like candlelight near the edge of an ancient sea. Before every harbor, the ocean had already shaped the continents. Before every myth of flood, creation, or underworld, water had already held the chemistry of life. Before every map, tide, or voyage, the sea had already been keeping time, and it still is. Tonight, if you imagine a wave arriving on a quiet beach, you are imagining one of Earth's oldest gestures. The water lifts, folds, breaks, and returns. It carries salt, minerals, warmth, fragments of shell, dissolved gases, and echoes of deep processes that began long before the first human story. The ocean we know today is not the same as the ocean of the young Earth, but it is connected to it. Every sea contains memory, not memory like a human mind, but memory held in cycles, chemistry, sediments, currents, and stone. The ocean remembers through layers. It remembers through fossils. It remembers through oxygen in the air, salt in the water, and the slow exchange between sky and sea. And perhaps the body understands this more quietly than thought does. The sound of waves can calm us because it is steady. Rain can soften the mind because it returns us to rhythm. A river can make time feel wider because it is always moving and always itself. Water reminds us that change can be gentle, that motion does not have to mean urgency, that even across billions of years, the world is held together by repeating patterns. So as this journey comes to rest, picture Earth from far away. A blue planet turning in darkness. Clouds drift over continents. Oceans shine beneath moonlight. Currents move invisibly through the deep. Somewhere, waves touch a quiet shore. Somewhere else, rain falls into a mountain stream, beginning a long journey back to the sea. And beneath all of this is the ancient story we have followed tonight. A young world cooling, rain gathering, basins filling, life beginning in water, oxygen rising, shorelines changing, continents moving, extinction and renewal unfolding across ages too vast to count. The early oceans were not merely a setting for life. They were one of the reasons life could continue. They were cradle, shelter, pathway, memory, and mirror. They helped turn stone and fire into a living world. And now, as you lie quietly, you can let that thought become simple and peaceful. You are resting on a planet with an oceanic heart. A planet shaped by water. A planet where even the deepest past still moves gently through the present. Let the mind soften like a shoreline at dusk. Let each breath come and go like a tide. And let the ancient ocean, vast and patient, fade into a calm blue distance, carrying with it the long, quiet history of Earth.